Great. It's such a great to be here again. And we're going to talk about something kind of light. And you must be imagining personality makeover, right? What do we mean by that? So, the makeover is going to be up to us. So, I'm going to talk about personality. And when we talk about personality, what are we really talking about, right? Are we are we trying to emphasize if a person is an introvert or an extrovert, or if I am shy or thinking, perceiving? There are many ways for us to describe and talk about personality. But what matters the most about personality is it's how we manifest our character. And our character, it's who we are, what we do, what we're going to do about our lives. When we talk about what is my mission, what is my path, and we talk to God, right? God, what do you want from me? Like Paul, right? Lord, what do you want from me? It's in us already. Everything that we ought to do in order for us to reach the place that we are to get to. So the most important thing about character is to understand first that character is the very essence of who we are, not this body, not this label, the day of my birth and my profession, the choices. Everything has to do, in the how I relate to the world, how we relate to the world. It has to do with our character. It has to do with our personality. How about our spirit? The core of who we are is our spirit. And what the spirit means is how I'm going to build myself here now to get to wherever I'm getting. And most of us are after one thing I believe in common, right? We wanted to do better every day. We might be happy and satisfied with life, but we want to get better. We wanted to be more complete. We wanted to be more of ourselves. Sometimes we spend a whole life to find who we are. So we're going to talk about virtues over vices. And this is how we're going to do a personality checkup, okay? And this is not me doing. This is every one of you. I'm going to invite every one of you to do it. And we're going to talk about some personalities here, some good examples. I'm going to ask my friend Alex to pass around some little notes and pen, a little paper and pen. At the end, we're going to have an evaluation. That's the makeover of it. So Benjamin Franklin, everybody knows who Benjamin Franklin is, right? Such an important and influential person that lived a very full life. He was not just a successful person for achievements, and he has many, many achievements since a very, very early age. And he was a politician, a diplomat, an inventor, a philosopher. He was a writer. He had so many, many talents. And he's one of our founding fathers, right? He's got many important achievements. He's also, if you didn't know about this information, he's also one of the spirits. When we talk about the spirits book and the high spirits who comes and gives some explanations and they give some enlightened answers to Allan Kardec's questions, he was one of those as well, amongst many others, very enlightened spirits. So one of the things that when we're talking about personality is like, how do we manifest who we are in the core spiritually to progress, right? Make progress intellectually, emotionally, and most of the times, making emotional progress, it's more difficult than intellectual progress. Because the emotional progress that we need to do, it's so connected to how we feel, how we handle situations. It is not just 1 + 1 is 2 and etc. It's how am I going to react towards something that's coming through me. And spiritual, right? A spiritual evolution. So we are born simple and ignorant, not knowing many things in life, many things about ourselves, and we start off with a lot of vices, more than virtues. So what build our character, what build our personality, what help us grow spiritually, is by developing, growing virtues, eliminating vices, understanding what are those imperfections, because there is going to be a point that we use so much, right? We're just human. We're not perfect. We're just human. I'm Aaron. I'm not perfect. But we are all destined to perfection. So at one point, we're just like, I'm only human. I'm not perfect. But I am in my way to perfection one day. So he established 13 virtues, and he lived by those, not just be on the theory, right? It's act on it. Benjamin Franklin lived 79 years of his life, and every single day of his life, he lived by those 13 virtues. And he kept check on it. He wrote in a card every week. He will act upon each of those virtues. So let's go over the virtues. You okay? Everybody listening all right? Talking too loud, too fast? Good? Let's go. So one of his sayings, right? By failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. A man who was always using all his power, because we don't need to wait tomorrow to come for us to make changes. We can make changes right now. We can prepare for tomorrow right now. So if I am to, I'm sorry about what I'm going to say, but if we're to die tomorrow, right? Are we really prepared? Do we know what happens? We don't want to think about it because it's sad, right? But it's only sad because we make it. We put in the perspective of sad. But the worst thing that can happen to us is to have a lot of regret, a lot of remorse, and so on, so on. So we have tools available to us, and we have to make use of those we don't need to be thinking about the afterlife. But I have to live today fully, not just passing by. The first virtue of Benjamin Franklin's temperance. Eat not to dullness and drink not to elevation. Balance, right? Let's have balance. Because we need to eat and drink. He started with a very basic, and he progressed from there. Silence. Speak not but what may benefit others or yourself. Avoid trifling conversation. Didn't Livia open the message here with something very related to that? It's like, we have this tendency to be dramatic about news or facts that, sometimes even if it affects us, we tend to broadcast that, right? Everybody has the little reporter inside of themselves. And sometimes it's something that it might impact other people. Everything that comes out of our mouth has a very, very huge impact in other people. Order. Let all your things have their places. Let each part of your business have its time. Have order. Again, balance, be organized, don't be wasteful. Let's go for the fourth one, resolution. Resolve to perform what you ought. Perform without fail what you resolve. So one of the Jesus teachings was very simply said, make sure that your yes, it's yes, and your no is no. Let's not be flaky, right? Or fake. Be truthful. Frugality. I deal with this with my wife sometimes because sometimes I call her frugal, but she's not really frugal. She's very wise about it because this is really what frugal means. Make no expense, but to do good to others or yourself. Waste nothing. And nowadays, in our society, we're so consumist, right? We consume everything. It's like everything has to be fast, everything has to be packaged in, and everything that we hear, we're buying because we are fed to just use things and get new things, and we waste a lot. And most of the times, whatever is a waste, whatever the excess of food is in my plate that is going to waste, it is missing in somebody's table. There is a problem in the world, and this problem has been in the world since the world is a world. It's called hunger. And there is more food to go around than people who are starving. It's unbelievable, and it's only because we are not. It's not just about being frugal. It's also being generous, right? Because it's not just, whatever is left over on my side. Most of the times, it's a waste because we don't act upon our generosity. It actually takes an effort for us to make the excess that we have to get to somebody who's in need. That part takes effort. And that's a virtue. And that's the virtue that we're lacking. Industry. Lose no time. Be always employed in something useful, unnecessary action.
There's a word missing.
Yeah, so it's a word missing, you're right. Yeah.
Avoid
Avoid, correct. It's because of the picture. Yeah. Avoid unnecessary action. So this is what Benjamin Franklin did every day of his life. He was so industrial. Do you know that? And because he was like involved in politics, and he was a diplomat, he was like negotiating for the United States in so many things with the British Parliament, and and those trips back then, some of those trips would take 80 days, by those ships back then, right? And every time he was making most of his times. He is a credit to be the discoverer of the currents, the theory of the currents. He used to be in the back of the ship and the boat, and he started. He invented the lightning rod, right? And it was not just by coincidence. He was always thinking. But the current, he used to tighten a little thread or like a string in bottles, empty bottles, and he used to just throw and just observe what happened. And he started to take notes of what happened, 10, 20 bottles and in the string, and he started to see that there was like a pattern, there was a behavior, and then he started theorizing about the currents. There were places in where they will move faster and the places that they won't, depending on how the direction of the boat was. And then he developed that theory, and then they later on discovered there are currents under the ocean that the ships go faster if they follow those currents rather than just go in the rough ocean. And because of that, they started doing more maritime maps that took into account those currents. Just because he was just thinking about it, right? He was not wasting time. And he invented like a musical instrument with crystals and many, many things. Sincerity. Use no hurtful deceit. Think innocently and justly. And if you speak, speak accordingly. Again, be very truthful, right? Justice. Wrong none by doing injuries or omitting the benefits that are your duty. So, very wise, because it's not just not wronging anyone, not causing harm to other people, but it's also not omitting ourselves. And this is not necessarily a vice, but that is a lack of virtue, right? It's the indifference. It's like a habit we have because we're concentrate ourselves so much into our needs and everyone's needs around us. It comes second or it's just not there. So most times we omit the benefits that is our duty. Moderation. Avoid extremes. Forbear resenting injuries so much as you think they deserve. So even with, and that is something that he's one of if we go over the Declaration of Independence that we have, there is so much balance in the Declaration of Independence. So everyone, it has the same opportunity, because there is always a moderation that's needed there, and that's some of the thought that he put into it. Cleanliness, tolerate no uncleanness, and embody clothes or habitation, because again, it goes with order, right? It's part, being clean, it is in a parallel, is also clean, not just physically, right? Here we're talking about, body, clothes, and habitation. But having clean thoughts, eliminating the negative thoughts, just like Livia mentioned here also in the opening. One of the greatest way for us to develop virtues, we have bad thoughts, and we all have, replace them. Replace with a good thought. And try to do that. Chastity. Rarely use venery, but for health or offspring. Venery is like sex, right? He used a fancy word for sex. Never do dullness, weaknesses, or to injury of your own or another's peace or reputation. In other words, not having sex just for the pleasure or the physical pleasure, just because dullness, right? Just because we are empty. Let's not fill ourselves with just those pleasure-seeking habits, but there is so much beauty in it. There is so much beauty in it that we can really pass by it and are not making a use of it as it is. It doesn't mean that chastity you have to just be a monk and live like a monk. That's not the purpose. Tranquility. Be not disturbed at trifles or accidents common or unavoidable. And this is really something that we all do too. It's hard to keep the peace of mind, right? It's hard to find that place of tranquility that we have regardless of what's going on in the world. But he worked on it every day. Doesn't mean that he had all of those virtues. He worked on those virtues every single day. That was his message. And humility. Imitate Jesus and Socrates, right? And this is actually the last virtue. It's the most important one. And he tried to live his life based upon those main teachings, Jesus and Socrates. So if you're talking about Jesus, we have to understand that when we're talking about virtues, he was the only spirit that was pure. 2,000 years ago, a perfect man, walked the earth, Jesus the Christ. In his life, all the virtues were lived and kept in perfect balance. He taught men truth that they might be free. His example and precepts provide the great standard, the only sure way. So, Jesus' messages, if we were to summarize everything, which is the law of love, it's us going to meet with the Father, have God not just as an impossible challenge for ourselves, but we can all live for perfection. But it takes virtues for it. And the most important virtue that he taught us in the Sermon of the Mount, you're familiar with the Sermon of the Mount? We also, in the Sermon on the Mount, we have the Beatitudes. The first Beatitude or blessings, right? Blessed are those, or or happy are those. The first blessing, the first happiness he mentions, blessed are those that are poor in spirit, which means humble. Blessed are those who are humble. Therefore, humility, it is a number one condition for us to be in the path of perfection. We don't need to be like Jesus overnight, and we probably won't be like Jesus, but we can have Jesus as an example and use those teachings and try to apply, like just like Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin he didn't live a perfect life. But with those 13 virtues, he tried to apply every day. And in his memoirs, he says, I failed many times. I failed over and over and over and over. Imagine the more responsibility you give him, more you are exposed to fail. But he went back again. He went back again, week after week. Okay, so this week I'm missing tranquility. I'm going to work on tranquility. And we're going to understand why he says that humility, his last virtue was humility, imitate Jesus and Socrates. And Jesus, one of Jesus' teachings that is very, 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 very key to his whole ministry, and it's called the Be Perfect, and we have this in the Gospel according to Spiritism, in the Spirit's book. He said, but I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. For if you love them which love you, what reward have you? Do not even the publicans do the same? If you salute your brethren only, just like your brothers and sisters, what do you have more than others? Do not even the publicans do so? Be you therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. At first, it's kind of hard to understand this, right? Even Freud could not explain this. Freud actually criticized this. He says, Jesus, really, that doesn't make sense. Because Freud studied, and Freud is, the father of psychiatry. He studied human behavior. It's not in the human behavior nature to act like this. Because if somebody hurt you, somebody did harm to you, it is not natural for you to forgive them just like that, to love them. But with Spiritism, in question 887, the Spirit's book, Kardec asked that question because Kardec was also a philosopher himself, a teacher, and he thought he was a very common sense kind of guy. And he asked the enlightened spirits, Jesus has also said, love your enemies, but would it not be contrary to our natural tendencies to love our enemies? And does not unfriendliness proceed from a want of sympathy between spirits? Meaning, isn't it natural that we like the people who are good to us and we relate, and the people who tend to hurt us, we like to keep a distance? Why now? Why should I? It's kind of hard to understand that. And the answer from the spirits was, it would certainly be impossible for a man to feel tender and ardent affection for his enemies. In other words, that's what Jesus says doesn't mean that you have to really love and be passionate about. And Jesus did not intend to prescribe anything of that kind. To love your enemies means to forgive them and to return good for evil. By so doing, you become their superior. By vengeance, you place yourself beneath them. Purely and simple, right? Because we are so imperfect, and this trait of lack of virtue, which is more in our vice side, is because we lack humility. And the basis of humility is to acknowledge that we are not above others. In fact, we have a supreme power that we report to, that we depend on. most of the times, we acknowledge God, we love God, but we live our lives on our own principles, on our own judgment, on our own way, that we make our own laws and our own values. By doing so, we distance ourselves so much from God that this becomes sort of very difficult, almost impossible, but it's a very natural thing. Because, as we say in the Lord's Prayer, right? Remember that part? Forgive our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us, our debtors, right? So, by doing that prayer is so powerful, because it's an exercise of us to remember, wait a minute, forgive our trespasses. I am acknowledging that I make mistakes. I do bad things. I have done bad things. I have probably hurt others. I probably lack love for myself and for others. So I'm acknowledging that I did something bad. As we forgive those who trespass against us, the moment that I allow myself, I ask for forgiveness, I ask for mercy, right? I can give mercy. That's the other beatitude, right? Blessed are the merciful. And in the first beatitude, blessed are those who are humble. It is a condition for us to allow love to come. Because we can only forgive if we have true love. First, for God, we respect. God has a law, and his law is unchangeable. And if we subject ourselves to the law of love, not to the law of ourselves first, right, and then the law of God, we're able to receive love. We receive love. We ask for forgiveness. By us accepting our position as, you know what, I have a lot of people who hurt me, but you know what, I hurt a lot of people too. So I'm not superior. So I'm not revengeful. And if I can accept that, I have room for forgiveness. And now we come to the second part. Remember, he says, imitate Jesus and Socrates. Socrates has a whole lot of wisdom that he didn't even write himself. It was Plato, right? But Socrates had 3 basic principles, and that's it. All of his wisdom relied on those 3 principles. The first principle was discover and pursue your life's purpose, right? We're talking about Benjamin Franklin. Remember, it's like, one of our most precious rights, right? That we deserve, we have the right to pursue our own happiness. That's a beautiful right that we have. And so Socrates says if we live by those 3 principles, we are complete. We are in our way to be the good person that we are. Strive to discover who you are. What is your life mission and what you are trying to become? It is necessary to lead a responsible and fully awake life. Wow. Do you guys feel awake? Are you awake? Really? You're so quiet. Alex, thanks for your honesty. Alex said he's not awake there. But we're talking about Socrates here. Socrates wrote this 600 years before Christ. He was like one of those messianic preparers of the way. So that's why when Christ came, not only that he had a whole line of, we're talking John the Baptist and so on that were preparing the way. We're talking about John the Baptist were preparing the way in a religious sense. Socrates was opening the minds of people. In fact, Socrates was put to death because he was accused to be corrupting the youth. That was his charge. Because his wisdom, his teaching was so different from everything that the Greeks were taught back then, and they have many gods, and he was teaching that you have a soul and there is this one God and you have to live, you have to know yourself. He was awakening people. There were spirits that were just walking by like zombies, and he says, guys, there's a whole lot of things we need to know, we need to do. So if you don't try to figure it out who you are and what you believe, then you are content to just exist. And what's the point in that? What is the worth of your existence? Wow. We can go home with just this. That's personality makeover right here. Thanks, Livia, for the title. It was very, very appropriate. And we might go on in this lifetime just going over, doing the same thing over and over and over, mechanically. But let's ask those questions. Who are we? Do we know? Do we care? Sometimes we don't ask that question because we're afraid of the answer. But then the second question is, what you believe, pardon me, if you don't try to figure out who you are, what you believe then who you are, if you believe then you are content to just exist, what is the point of that? What is the worth of your existence? That's very, very strong. So if right now, if you ask that question in your mind, and if you come out with no answer to that question, what is the point? What is the worth of your existence? What are we doing here? That goes for the young ones too. You're not here just to listen to a talk that, sometimes it makes sense and sometimes don't make sense right now. But we are here to take advantage of sharing what is important for us to think about. This is Socrates' second principle, care for your soul. It is very summarized here. You can look up this in much more complexity. The most important task in life is caring for your soul. Your soul is the real person. Look, is a spirit, so what? Who you really are. It is the center of your character and what makes you who you are. It is the basis of your thoughts, feelings, values, and decisions. So, Allan Kardec, in the introduction of the Gospel According to Spiritism, very, very appropriately, he lines up not just those three principles, but he does a parallel of Socrates' teachings and Jesus' teachings. Very, 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 almost the same. It's incredible. And Spiritism, that's why Spiritism is a philosophy, it's a science. Because we have to use religion not just to believe in the dogmas, in what's being said, and respect this and pray that. It is to make sense of things. Those are important questions. If I don't feel that I have a soul inside of me, if I just feel that this is just a body and that life is going to end, what's really the purpose? It's like we're robots, right? This is the final one. Be a good person, and you will not be harmed by outside forces, right? So this is like a conclusion. So it's like first, discover the purpose of your life's purpose. Discover and pursue your life's purpose. So first, find out who you are. Ask those questions. Then, care for your soul. And then understand that we are a soul. We're much more than what we are represented by our bodies only. And then thirdly, be a good person and you will not be harmed by outside forces. So this is a way for us to fulfill our whole life, our whole capacity. So let's read together. If your soul is good, then outside forces cannot harm you. And Jesus said, if your eye is good, your whole body is good. Your soul is good. But if your eye is bad, everything is bad too, because out of the evil that is in our heart, that's how we speak evil, because it is in our heart. That's why Jesus said in a parable, if your eye is good, you have light inside of you. So it goes hand in hand here. If the most important part of you is your soul, and the soul is not the physical, but inward, then it cannot be harmed. The body may be harmed by another person, but the soul cannot, unless you yourself to become successful to others. Search constantly for wisdom by the way of practicing self-evaluation, if you wish your soul to be liberated from outside harm. So that we have a lot of fuel to talk about personality here, and how be a good person and you will not be harmed by outside forces. Because this is the challenges that we have in life, good or bad, are to help us to progress, right? To make progress, to evolve. So we're always going to be dealing with outside forces. So if you replace outside forces for, a very difficult job that I have, a very difficult boss, very difficult family member, a very difficult traffic, a very difficult enemy that I have, unfortunately we have those in our lives. Sometimes we don't want to have enemies, but other people make us to be their enemies. So I guess we become their enemies, right? So it is a lack of finding our souls. And his recommendation, self-evaluation. Do you follow? Are we all familiar with self-evaluation? In a show of hands, how many of us do a self-evaluation? Say every month. Couple, right? How many of us do a self-evaluation once a year at least? Okay, that's good. Because what we're going to talk about now, we're going to do a self-evaluation together based on the good person, which is in the Gospel according to Spiritism, which is a fantastic, a phenomenal, not just a reading, is a phenomenal experience. Because when we talk about the good person, it gives us the rationale for us to examine, am I being a good person? What do I need to do? And what is the logic of being a good person? So everybody's got a piece of paper and pen. If you don't, we can help you. Everybody that's there, maybe Alex can help you. So this is how we're going to do it, right? We're going to go over 24 virtues. Remember, we're talking about virtues here. For us to replace our vices with virtues. So we're going to go over 24 virtues. And as we go over one by one, I'm going to read one by one. You're going to rate yourself how you apply that virtue in your life. And let's just be very honest. This is for yourself. You don't need to share this with anyone. So number one is never. You rate yourself never. That never applies. Number two, if the score is it's 2, is because that very little. I do that very little.
Okay.
Number 3, so. That applies to me. I act on that virtue sometimes. If I score 4, it means like that applies to me most of the times. I apply myself. And number 5, score 5 is always. Like for instance, justice, right?
Ready? I'm ready.
Everybody ready?
Oh, yes.
Did you understand the rating system?
Uh-oh.
Okay.
The guys are going to...
So this is not, the purpose here is not for us to be the good person, right? The purpose here is for us to honestly self-evaluate the results and just try to be as honest as possible. Because at the end, and once we go home, we're going to do exactly how Benjamin Franklin did. Do you remember what I said about Benjamin Franklin? What did he do? He self-evaluated himself with those 13 virtues every week. Every week he would take one of those, every day of the week, he would take one of those 13 virtues and he would try to act upon it. Because just knowing is not enough. We have to act on it. So let's go for number 1, justice.
I'm ready.
The virtue of justice. One observes the law of justice, love, and charity in their highest degree of purity. How often do I do that? Never, very little, so, sometimes, most times, or always. Okay, so you can just write the number and the letter. If you don't want to write the whole thing, just write justice and your rating. Number 2, conscience. One examines their conscience concerning their own actions. Wow, that's a big one, right? So, how often do I use that virtue? How often am I conscientious about my actions? Is it never? Is it very little? So, sometimes, most times, and always. Okay, so you got the rating system. Let's continue. There's 24. Obedience. One asks if they have violated the laws of God, if they have practiced any evil, if they have done all the good that was possible. Okay, that was obedience. You can just write 3-0 so you remember if you don't want to write the whole thing. 4, service. One asks if they voluntarily disregarded any occasion to be useful. Now, that's also be charitable, right? Ready for number 5? Is everybody in number 5? We're good? Dedication. One asks if anyone has any complaint to make of them. Number 6, lovingness. One asks if they have done to others everything they would wish done to themselves. One asks if they have done to others everything that they would wish done to themselves. Number 7, faith. One has faith in God, in His goodness, in His justice, and in His wisdom. How often am I being that person? How often am I putting my faith in God? Number 8, hope. One has faith in the future, which is the reason to put spiritual possessions before those of temporary nature. So hope, am I being more spiritual than physical? Am I reacting to everything in my life in a very hopeful way? Number 9, wisdom. One knows that all vicissitudes or vices of life, all pain and all deceptions are trials or atonements, and accept them without murmuring. In other words, do I accept everything without being a whining, right? Number 10, generosity. One does good for the sake of goodness without waiting for payment of any kind. Number 11, joy. One finds satisfaction in the service they are able to render and in the happiness that they promote. How often are we joyful? Goodness. One is always good, humane, and benevolent with everyone. 13, respect. One respects all sincere convictions in others and never launch reprobation against those who think otherwise. We're not revengeful, right? 14, charity. Charity is their guide. Is charity something that I apply every day? Mercy. One does not have a rancor, hate, nor yet desire revenge or vengeance. That was mercy. 16, indulgence. One is indulgent towards the weaknesses of others. 17, benevolence. One does not take pleasure in looking for defects in others. 18, perfection. One studies their own imperfections. See, look at the difference. In order for me to be perfect, and that was Jesus' teaching, right? I'm studying my own imperfection in order for me to know what I need to do to be perfect, right? Humility. One does not find their own values at the expense of others. Humility is number 19, okay? One does not find their own values at the expense of others. We're almost done here. Number 20, modesty. One is not flattered about their own wealth. Virtue. One uses but does not abuse the assets they have been given. Number 22, kindness. One treats others with kindness and benevolence. How often do I use that virtue? Hard, right? Responsibility. One fulfills their duties with conscientiousness. That was number 23, responsibility. And the last one, 24, understanding. One respects all rights that the law of nature gives to others. The law of nature is everything that we're, it's the law of God, right? It's also called the divine law. So the makeover, self-evaluation, is like on the weekly basis or once a month. If you cannot do it once a week, don't do it once a year only. Try to do at least once a month. Pray for improvement and inner change because it's hard, but it's not impossible. It's hard. But whatever is hard, whatever causes some pain, it makes us move and it makes us change. So we pray first, and then we act frequently to be better on the virtues scored sometimes and lesser. So if you score most of the times and always, you're good. But we're not looking for perfection. That you're like in a way of perfection. So myself, and I guess most of you, we scored in the median, like sometimes so-so, sometimes very little, and sometimes even never.
It's going to be a long prayer.
It's going to be a long prayer. And with that, my friends, we come to a closing. The makeover, it's not something that us spiritists or just people here who are trying to bring a message. It is very, very personal, right? So we all know the burdens that we have in our lives. And we all know when our shoe is tight. We all know where we fall short. But again, to use Jesus as our example, every time that we need healing, Jesus always called our attention to use our faith. It wasn't only him, he was just a vehicle of the healing. We bring our own healing. Your faith healed you. Your faith opened your eyes. Your faith helped you walk again. Your faith gave you life again. And that's what we need to do. Thank you so much, and much blessings to all.